So once again, welcome back to the session, everyone. So last day's session, we have discussed about the area of audit risk. And in this day's session, we will be properly discussing about the area of substantive procedures, which is one of the core area for the paper AA. So, well, we have already spent multiple days on the area of substantive procedures, right? Because it's one of the most important area, because anyway, we will be having question from the area of substantive procedures, and that too multiple questions will be there. And basically, when it comes to the area of substantive procedures, we know that these are the procedures that will be performed by an auditor in order to identify the mistakes in a company's financial statements. Financial statements mistake കണ്ടുപിടിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് നമ്മൾ ചെയ്യുന്ന പ്രൊസീജിയേഴ്സിനെയാണ് substantive procedures എന്ന് പറയുന്നുണ്ടാവുക. And there will be a variety of substantive procedures that will be asked for your exam. It can be general, assertion specific, scenario based, and scenario plus assertion based. It can be anything like this. So we will look into this later. So when actually we have already studied a lot of substantive procedures, especially with our notes regarding the substantive procedures, we have gone through multiple substantives like opening balances, bank, directors' emoluments, revenue, purchase and other expenses, sales tax liability, payroll, provision, receivables, and so on and so on. So all these are the substantives through which we have already gone through during our regular sessions. I believe everyone might have gone through this set of substantives. So anyway, we'll just do one thing. We'll quickly brush through the substantives first, and we need to know when we need to apply this set of substantives to the scenario. So guys, consider that normally during the course of your exam, you might be getting a scenario, and in the scenario, the examiner will mention you that the client company is a new client for the audit firm. And it's the first time ever auditor is planning for this particular client. So when we are auditing a client for the first time, there's always a possibility that opening balance of the client might be misstated. So when a client's opening balance is misstated, it is the responsibility of the auditor to assess where there is actual mistake. So these are the set of procedures which an auditor need to perform in order to test the opening balance. So either you will be getting a direct question about the procedures to test the opening balance, you can give these points. Or on the other hand, in case if you're getting a scenario which states that it's a new client and what other procedures need to be performed by the auditor in the initial planning stage. So in that case, you might be testing the opening balance. So you can also consider in that manner. Then you need to think about the bank. Probably the bank can be asked as a direct question, can be also be based on a scenario as well. And bank is one of the common area which usually used to appear in almost all the exams. So it's important to learn this. So basically the examiner might be asking you to write the substantive procedures in relation to the bank balance or to confirm the client company's bank balance. If it is not based on scenario and if it is a direct question, then you can write these points directly. Or on the other hand, sometimes the examiner might have provided a scenario and you are being asked to write substantive procedures in relation to bank. In that case, you need to properly go through the scenario. You have to understand what is actually mentioned in the scenario, and corresponding to the scenario, you have to give the substantive procedures. Say, for example, if it is in the scenario, the examiner have given you a statement that the client is having bank account in multiple banks. So in that case, what you can do? You can obtain bank confirmation from all bank with which client have done their business during the year in order to confirm the year-end bank balance. Same as that, if it is mentioned in the scenario that the client have already prepared their bank reconciliation statement. So if it is mentioned that the client have prepared the bank reconciliation statement, in that case, you can ask to reperform the bank reconciliation statement to confirm the accuracy. But if it is mentioned that the client have not carried out the bank reconciliation, or for the past few months, client have not carried out the bank reconciliation, in that case, you should never give the point reperform the arithmetic of reconciliation because they haven't performed it. You can only reperform something if it is already been performed by somebody else. So if it is not done, you cannot do that. So you have to read the scenario properly. You have to check whether the client have already prepared the reconciliation statement or not. If they have prepared the reconciliation, you can ask to reperform that. Same as that. If you want to verify the balances in the bank reconciliation statement by inspecting cash book and bank statements and general ledger, there should be a reconciliation which is already been prepared by the client company. So if there is no reconciliation, you cannot do this point as well. Instead, in both the cases, what you can do, you can discuss with the management about the reasons why they have not undertaking the bank reconciliation statement, and you can request them to prepare one. Other than that, you cannot do anything else. So in that case, you have to do the same thing. Plus, you can always consider the possibility of cross-checking cash book to the bank statements or vice versa. So what I was intending to say is the same thing, that whenever you have got a question, you have to consider whether it's based on scenario or a direct question. If it's based on scenario, you have to read the scenario properly. You have to understand what the examiner is trying to convey, and you have to write the points corresponding to that. അപ്പൊ എന്താ സിനാരിയോയിലുള്ളത് എന്ന് പ്രോപ്പർലി വായിച്ച് മനസ്സിലാക്കിയിട്ട് അതിന് കറസ്പോണ്ടിങ് ആയിട്ട് മാത്രമേ എഴുതാവുള്ളൂ. റീകൺസിലേഷൻ ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ല എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുമ്പോൾ നമ്മളത് റീപെർഫോം ചെയ്യാൻ പറയരുത്. പകരം എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഇത് ചെയ്യാത്തതെന്നുള്ളതിനെ കുറിച്ച് വേണം നമ്മൾ കൺസിഡർ ചെയ്യാൻ. ഓക്കെ. Then we have studied about directors' emoluments. So everyone should be having a proper understanding on the term emolument first. So basically, when it comes to the term emoluments, these are the set of payments that a company might be paying out for a director. It includes salary, fees, bonus, pension contribution, retirement benefit, non-cash benefit, compensation for the loss of office, and more. So these are the set of payments that will be made to a director around. Consider that if it is mentioned that what are the procedures need to be performed by the auditor in relation to the bonus payout, and it is mentioned in the scenario that these bonuses are paid for the company's employees. So if the bonus payout is for company's employees, then in that case, you should not mention to directors' emoluments. If it's related to employee bonus, then it should be under the payroll system. So you have to consider substantive procedures that are specific to payroll. If it is relating to a director's bonus, then that will be coming under emoluments. Upon director's emoluments എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ മാത്രമേ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ director's bonus എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ മാത്രമേ emolumentsന്റെ പോയിന്റ് എഴുതാവുള്ളൂ. Employee bonus ആണെങ്കിൽ you have to give the payroll related points. And whenever you get a question based on any of these, consider that you will be getting question on what are the substantive procedures need to be performed by the auditor in relation to the pension contribution. In that case, please avoid first 2 points. As I used to always mention, the first 2 points should be used only if you are getting a question on director's emoluments itself, or if you're getting any question on specific emolument, then in that case, you have to use the other points, and you can replace the term emoluments with the one that the examiner demands. Say, for example, if you're getting a question on pension contribution, then compare the pension contribution with the previous year's contribution and with the expectation taking into account knowledge obtained during the audit. Agree the pension contribution to the payroll record for the individual director and check amount paid on bank statements. Agree with the payroll record. Review director's contract and ensure pension contributions are consistent with terms of this contract. Consider the adequacy of the disclosures for directors' pension contribution in accordance with applicable accounting standards and local legislation, including separate disclosure if it demands for the amounts to be in relation respect of the director's pension contribution. So this is how you have to provide the points. Then when it comes to revenue, again, you might be getting a direct question from the area of revenue, not sure, but still. Purchase and other expense. See, whenever you get a substantive, you should be having a confusion. You should be having a confusion between different points. Say, for example, this purchase and other expenses, especially the other expenses might strike prepayments as well as accruals. So in some cases, you might be getting a scenario and it specifies that company is having electricity expense which need to be paid on last month. However, the amount is still outstanding. What are the substantive procedures that need to be performed by the auditor in relation to the electricity expense? So in that case, actually, the examiner is not demanding about the expenses related substantive procedures. Instead, they are asking you for substantive procedures in relation to accruals because that payment is not yet done. So it's an outstanding payment. The outstanding payments will be called as an accrual. So you have to write the substantive procedure in relation to accruals. So this was a point we learned in relation to the accruals, right? So in this case, we have to write the substantive procedure in relation to the accruals instead of relating to expenses. അപ്പം എക്സ്പെൻസിനെ കുറിച്ച് ആയിരിക്കില്ല എഴുതിയേക്കുന്നത്, നിങ്ങളോട് ചോദിച്ചേക്കുന്ന എക്സ്പെൻസിനെ കുറിച്ചായിരിക്കും. പക്ഷെ എക്സ്പെൻസ് ഔട്ട്സ്റ്റാൻഡിംഗ് ആയിട്ട് നിൽക്കുക എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ അവിടെ അക്രൂവൽസിന്റെ വേണം എഴുതാനായിട്ട്. And there can also be chances of having the other way as well. The examiner might mention to you that the auditor is required to pay a salary. The client company is required to pay a salary amount on 1st of April, and they have already made the payment on February itself. So it means the salary is prepaid. So in that case, they are not demanding points relating to payroll or expenses. Instead, they are demanding points in relation to the prepayments because that expense is already paid. So you have to consider the expenses against prepayments as well as against the accruals. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Then normally when it comes to sales tax liability, it will be a direct question. Then the payroll related point can be scenario based, in addition to which it can also be direct question. Provision will be purely be scenario based. So you have to use the general points to write the answers in relation to provision, because we know that there are many kind of provision, like redundancy provisions will be there, provision for bad and doubtful debts will be there, we'll call it allowances. Then there can be chances of having provision for litigation and claims against the company. And depending on the types and nature of provision, the things might vary. So you have to consider all these sort of provisions. Okay. Then receivables. Basically, when it comes to the receivables area, well, we have studied a lot of points, especially in relation to substantive procedures based on assertions. We have studied completeness for receivables. We have studied points in relation to the existence of receivables. Then accuracy, valuation, allocation for receivables. Then rights and obligation. We have studied points in relation to the classification. Then cutoff, occurrence, presentation, and more. See, out of which one of the most important assertion is the existence of receivables. So normally, examiner used to recurringly test the same point. They might ask you to write substantive procedures in order to confirm existence of receivables itself. So when they ask for procedures for existence of receivables, it will be a scenario-based substantive. So you have to exactly give the points in relation to confirm existence of the receivables balance. Okay. Then the most important one is inventory. So, well, when it comes to the points relating to inventory, the first thing that you have to keep in mind is that we have studied a lot of points in relation to the inventory, especially in our syllabus area. There are a lot of inventory related procedures to be learned. First thing, well, we have got inventory related points as assertion specific points, right? So there are some assertions relating to the inventory which we need to test. So there are some assertion related points first hand. So basically, first thing in relation to the inventory will be assertion related points of inventory. So, well, we have already studied the assertion related points for inventory, which includes the procedures to confirm the completeness of inventory, the procedures to confirm the rights and obligation of inventory, existence of inventory, occurrence, rights and obligation, cutoff, accuracy, valuation, allocation, classification. We have studied all of this, right? So there are points in relation to the assertion. Then next we have studied points that we need to perform before the inventory count. Then we have studied points that we need to consider during the inventory count. Then after the inventory count. And well, we have also studied points in relation to inventory held with the third party. Okay, inventory held with third party. Then if the inventory is recorded using standard cost method, then inventory is recorded at standard cost can be considered as a point. And finally, if there is any possibility that the company is having continuous inventory count, so the points in relation to continuous inventory count also we learned. So these are the seven set of points we learned in relation to inventory, right? Inventory count that we need to perform, procedures in relation to the inventory before the inventory count, then inventory attendance at the count, then after the count, and inventory held by third party related procedures, standard costing procedures, continuous inventory count procedures. So there are possibilities where the examiner might told you that there are some concerns about the company's inventory's quality. The inventory is held in the company's warehouse and the company is not sure whether the inventory is valued appropriately or not. And there will be some points in relation to that. And the examiner is asking you to write the substantive procedures in relation to the inventory. So in that case, probably the examiner might be considering to give substantive procedures in relation to valuation of inventory, maybe an assertion specific one. So you have to write the points in relation to accuracy, valuation, allocation. Then it may be mentioned in the scenario that the audit meeting is going on with the client company and the client is planning to undertake the inventory count in the next week or in the upcoming week. And what are the procedures need to be performed by the auditor? So in that case, they are expecting us to provide points that we need to perform before the inventory count. Or it may be mentioned that the client company is already undertaking the company's inventory count and what are the procedures need to be performed by the auditor. So in that case, the count is going on. So we need to write the points in relation to during the inventory count. Or it may be mentioned that already the client have undertaken the inventory count in the last week and our auditor have also attended the inventory count. And what are the substantive procedures need to be performed by the auditor? So the count is already been undertaken and the auditor have already attended that as well. So here the auditor need to provide the points in relation to after the count. Suppose there are also possibilities where the examiner will give you a very huge scenario and out of which the examiner might have pointed that the inventory is held with third party. Some of the company's inventory are held with third party. So you have to write the points in relation to inventory held with third party location because all of the points will not be valid because the inventory is held at third party. So the procedures need to be performed specifically for that. So we need to write the inventory related to third party point itself. Then it may be mentioned that the company is valuing inventory at standard cost. So if the inventory is being recorded at standard cost, then specific procedures have been performed in relation to that. But in the requirement, the examiner will ask you to write the substantive procedures in relation to the inventory. However, within the scenario, it may be mentioned that inventory is recorded at standard cost. So in that case, you have to give standard cost related points. Finally, if the inventory is being recorded by the client on the basis of continuous inventory count, then again, the entire set of procedures might vary. We need to write specific points for continuous inventory count itself. But there also in the requirement, the examiner will not make any changes. The examiner will ask you to write substantive procedures in relation to inventory itself. But within the scenario, it may be mentioned that the client company is having continuous inventory count method. Or it can also be a mix of scenario, whereby within the scenario itself, they will state that some of the inventory are held with the third party and the company is valuing inventory at standard cost. So you have to write a mix of point for standard cost and inventory held with third party. Is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Then when it comes to trade payables, again, it's assertion specific. But out of all the assertion, the most important assertion for the trade payables will be completeness. Okay. Because there is always possibility that when it comes to the payables balance, company might try to understate the amount of payables. So the completeness will be affected. So completeness will be one of the most important and crucial assertion for the trade payables. Then cutoff is there, rights and obligation is there, existence is there, accuracy, valuation, and allocation is also there. And the next one is tangible non-current asset. See, when it comes to the tangible non-current asset, well, we know that anything can come under this category, like the company's property, plant, and equipment can be there, or a land and building can be there, anything can be there. Any asset which we use for over a year can be considered as a non-current asset. And if it is physically observable and inspected, then it will be a tangible non-current asset. And you need to have confusions here also. And the main thing that must confuse you is the point that you need to look whether it's an inventory or a tangible non-current asset. At the same time, you have to have a confusion of non-current asset with that of intangible asset. Okay. It may be mentioned in the scenario, what are the procedures need to be performed by the auditor to confirm the valuation of vehicle. So when the examiner asks you to provide substantive procedures for the valuation of vehicle, you should not directly write non-current assets valuation related points. Instead, you have to read the introductory paragraph of the question and you have to understand what kind of company it is. Consider that it's a car manufacturer. So if it's a car manufacturer, if you are required to write the substantive procedures in relation to the valuation of vehicle, you have to give inventories valuation related points. But on the other hand, if it's a very normal company and their principal course of activity is not car manufacturing, in that case, for that company, car will be a tangible non-current asset. So in that case, you can provide substantive procedures for the valuation of tangible non-current assets itself. Because in both cases, the answer will be entirely different. Because we know that when it comes to an inventory, we will be considering inventory to be recorded lower of cost or NRV. However, on the other hand, in case of a tangible non-current asset, the valuation will be entirely different. We will be recording the tangible non-current asset using cost model or revaluation model, and gain and losses of all these assets will be taken to OCI and on. So the treatment is entirely different. So you have to properly read the scenario and you have to identify whether the examiner is asking about an inventory or about a non-current asset. And at the same time, it may be mentioned in the scenario that the auditor need to perform procedures to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence in relation to the addition of assets. So you have got a requirement to write the procedures in relation to addition of assets. So when the examiner demands you to provide substantives in relation to addition of assets, you have to read the scenario to understand whether it's a tangible asset or an intangible asset. So if it's a tangible asset, then you have to write the addition of tangible assets related point. Or if it is in the scenario that the company have purchased a patent during the current year, in that case, it's relating to intangible asset instead of tangible assets. So properly scenario വായിച്ചു നോക്കുക. Addition of assets എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ നേരെ ചാടി കയറി PP related point എഴുതരുത്. Intangible asset ആണെങ്കിൽ അവിടെ നമ്മൾ എഴുതേണ്ടത് എന്താ? അവിടെ നമ്മൾ എഴുതേണ്ടി വരിക intangible asset related points ആയിരിക്കും. അമോർട്ടൈസേഷനും കഥയും ഒക്കെ ആയിരിക്കും എഴുതുക. ടാൻജിബിൾ ആണെങ്കിൽ അവിടെ ഡിപ്രിസിയേഷനും അതേപോലെ തന്നെയുള്ള ബാക്കിയുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങളായിരിക്കും എഴുതുന്നുണ്ടാവുക. So answer will be entirely different. So you have to focus on the question properly. And when it comes to tangible non-current asset, one of the important assertion is definitely the valuation. And in addition to which, normally recurringly we used to get questions from the area of addition of non-current asset, then self-constructed assets and disposal of asset. Addition and disposal is main among these. And at the same time, it may be mentioned in the scenario that the auditor need to perform procedures to confirm procedures to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence in relation to addition of assets, or maybe more precisely, addition of non-current assets itself. But you have to read the scenario properly and you have to find whether the company have purchased it as an asset or the company have constructed it as an asset. Consider that if a company have purchased a building during the current year, then specifically you can write the points of addition of non-current asset. Company have purchased a building during the current year, but the company have constructed a building during the current year. So it's self-constructed assets. Both are addition, but the way in which we need to perform the procedures are entirely different. So you have to find whether a company have itself constructed the asset or the company have purchased the asset. Both are additions. So if the company have purchased an asset, it's addition of non-current asset. If the company have constructed the assets, it's self-constructed assets related points. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Then we have studied the points in relation to valuation of depreciation, then revaluation of PPE as well. Then non-current liability, the examiner might not be directly asking you to write the procedures in relation to non-current liability, but instead they might ask you to write the procedures in relation to bank loan. So when they ask for procedures in relation to the bank loan, well, we know that if it's a loan which need to be repaid over a year, then automatically it's a non-current liability because the settlement takes around more than a year. So we have to write the points in relation to non-current liabilities itself. Then intangible asset, as we mentioned earlier, you must be always be having a confusion for intangible asset with that of the tangible asset. And when it comes to intangible asset, you have to consider all the intangible asset. Say, for example, consider that the company have purchased a copyright or maybe a patent or maybe any kind of trademark or maybe any kind of brand or any kind of goodwill. In all these cases, you can write the points in relation to the intangible assets itself. And at the same time, you should also be considering the research and development related points. Maybe the examiner might be asking you to perform substantive procedures in relation to the research and development. But once an asset is capitalized as development expenditure, from the date on which the asset becomes available for use, we should consider it as an intangible asset itself. So there we need to make a mix of research and development related point and intangible asset related point. അപ്പം റിസർച്ച് ആൻഡ് ഡെവലപ്മെന്റ് ആയിരിക്കും നിങ്ങളോട് ചോദിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടാവുക, പക്ഷെ അവർ ഡെവലപ്മെന്റ് എക്സ്പെൻഡിച്ചർ ആയിട്ട് ക്യാപിറ്റലൈസ് ചെയ്ത് ഇന്റാഞ്ചിബിൾ അസറ്റ് ആയിട്ട് കാണിച്ചു എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ടാവും. അപ്പൊ അവിടെ ഇന്റാഞ്ചിബിൾ അസറ്റിന് ആറാണ്ടിയുടെയും കൂടെ പോയിന്റ്സ് വേണം പറയാനായിട്ട്. Then going concern related procedures, maybe it might be mentioned in the scenario that the company is struggling to meet their going concern ability. So in that case, you can write the going concern procedures. As we mentioned earlier, prepayments and accruals can be usually be tested in your exam. Prepayments are the amount that we have made in advance. I mean, the payments which we have made in advance. So in case if any of the expenses are paid by the company in advance, and if the examiner asks you to write the procedures in relation to the expenses, actually they mean the prepayments at the same time. And if the amount is still outstanding, it means the accruals is there. So you have to write the points in relation to the accruals as well. Equity share capital can be asked directly. Dividends can be asked directly. Same as that, reserves will be asked directly. But whenever you get a question on reserve, you should be more precise to the scenario or specific to the scenario. So when it comes to reserves, you have to clearly understand what kind of reserve is it. Is that a general reserve? Or is that a capital redemption reserve? Is that a share premium? And you have to give the points accordingly. And correct and mistakes also same. Overall review of financial statements also same. And usually we used to find in the exam that the examiner might ask you to use computer-assisted auditing techniques. So if the examiner is demanding you to perform computer-assisted auditing techniques, you have to keep in mind, normally we will use the computer-assisted auditing technique or CAT mainly for 4 purposes. First of all, we need to perform analytical procedures. So you can use the computer for comparing the current year data with that of the prior year. Or you can use the data for selecting a representative sample. You can use the ratio to recalculate, or you can use it for cutoff testing. So consider that you're getting a question on trade payables. Okay, trade payables. So what you can do, computer assisted procedures for trade payables. You can mention that audit software can be used to perform analytical procedure by comparing trade payables with the prior year and industry data. Audit software can be used to select representative sample of trade payables for further investigation. Audit software can be utilized to recalculate the trade payables to ensure mathematical accuracy. Or else consider that if it's based on PPE, then audit software can be used to recalculate the depreciation to ensure mathematical accuracy, amortization to ensure mathematical accuracy. You can write it like that. CAD can be used to undertake cutoff testing by assessing the dates of last GRN and purchase invoice recorded related to pre-year end, and those related to post-year end were excluded. So in this manner, you can give the substantives. So just keep this one in mind. Whenever you get a question on computer-assisted auditing technique, CAD can be specifically be used for 4 purposes. 1, to perform analytical procedure. 2, to perform selection of representative sample. Then you can use it for the purpose of recalculation. Finally, you can use it for the purpose of performing cutoff testing. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So these are the points which you have to mainly keep in mind in order to understand the substantive procedures that you need to perform in relation to the scenario itself. Then, see, as we mentioned earlier, we will be getting multiple kinds of questions from the area of substantive procedures. Especially when we know that substantive is one of the most important area. So we need to have a proper understanding on all these kind of questions. Either you might be a question which is very general, whereby you will not be having a scenario. The examiner might ask you to perform substantive procedures in relation to the income tax accruals. So you can directly write the substantive based on your knowledge or on the basis of what we already learned. It can also be assertion-specific substantive, whereby the examiner will directly ask you to write substantive procedures in order to confirm the existence of receivables, in order to confirm the existence of payables. They will ask you like that. So that's the assertion-specific substantive. Say, for example, well, we have already discussed the same question in our earlier session, but just to get an overall understanding, I will show you the same question again. So it's a question called dashing company. So the draft financial statements recognize a profit before tax of 2.6 million and total asset of 18 million. You have been given responsibility for auditing receivables, which is a material balance, and as part of the audit approach, positive receivable circularization is to be undertaken. So the examiner have told us that we have to perform a positive receivable circularization, which means we have to send external confirmation, and you will be responsible for auditing receivables. Nothing else is mentioned in the scenario. And directly you're getting a question here. Describe the substantive procedures other than receivable circularization the auditor should perform to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence to verify each of the following assertion in relation to dashing company's receivables. The examiner is directly asking us to write the substantive procedures to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence to verify each of the following assertion in relation to dashing company. So we have not got anything in the scenario. Instead, they are directly asking us substantive procedures to confirm accuracy, valuation, allocation, completeness, rights, and obligation. And they have told us that we will be getting equal mark for each of this area. So 6 marks will be equally be split between this area. So we'll be getting 2 marks for accuracy, valuation, and allocation related point, 2 marks for completeness, and 2 marks for rights and obligation. So what we need to do in this case, since it's a direct question, direct assertion specific question, nothing we have got from the scenario. So we have already studied procedures in relation to accuracy, valuation, and allocation. You have to give 2 specific assertion related point for accuracy, valuation, allocation, 2 assertion related points for completeness, and 2 points for rights and obligation. So as we have already discussed over here, we have studied the receivables related point. So 2 points from completeness, 2 points from accuracy, valuation, allocation, and 2 points from rights and obligation. So this is how we have to give answers for direct substantive. Is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And the next category, as we mentioned, is scenario-based. So basically, when it comes to scenario-based substantive procedures, the examiner might give us a scenario. See, over here, they have given a small scenario. At the planning meeting, the finance director of dashing company informed the audit engagement partner that company was closing one of its small production sites. And as a result, number of employees would be made redundant. A redundancy provision of 110,000 is included in the draft financial statements. So they have told us that company is planning to close down one of the small production site. So some of the employees will lose their job, for which they have created a redundancy provision of 110,000. ഇപ്പോൾ കുറെ ആളുകളുടെ ജോലി പോവും, അതിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് redundancy provision വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു 110,000. So they have asked a direct substantive here. Actually, so not direct question here, actually, which is based on scenario. Describe the substantive procedure auditor should perform to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence in relation to a redundancy provision at the year end. So what are the procedures need to be performed by the auditor to confirm the redundancy provision at the year end? So it's a pure scenario-based question. They have already told us that they are closing down one of their production site. They have created a redundancy provision. This is what they have told us. So when you get a scenario-based substantive, first of all, you have to think about what you need to confirm as part of the substantive procedure. So what do you need to confirm here? First of all, definitely you need to confirm whether the redundancy provisions amount is 110,000 itself, right? So you have to confirm whether the actual amount of redundancy provision required is 110,000. Secondly, you need to consider the assumptions on the basis of which the company have created provision of 110,000, which means you need to know the rationale on the basis of which they have determined the amount of provision. Then third, definitely you need to know about the status of this particular redundancy provision. Say, for example, where we know that a provision should be created only if there is a present obligation. So we need to know whether there is a present obligation for the company. And when it comes to the redundancy, an obligation for the company will arise only if the company have informed about the redundancy to the employees, or the company should have actively started the program of reorganizing. Then only there will be a present obligation. So we need to know whether the company have already informed to the to the employees about the redundancy. Then definitely we need to know whether there will be a probable future cash outflow for the company, because only a provision have to be created if there is a probable future cash outflows. And finally, we need to know whether the company have provided adequate amount of disclosures relating to the redundancy as well. So these are the things which we need to confirm. So you should not be blank. When you get a scenario, you need to first of all think, okay, what all are the things that I need to confirm as part of the procedure? Yeah, I need to know whether the amount of provision is 110,000 itself. About the management's assumption, I need to know whether the provision is probable. Cash outflow is probable, whether there is a present obligation, as well as whether the disclosure is appropriate. So these are the three things which you need to consider in order to write a substantive procedure. Whenever you write a substantive procedure, you should be writing a procedure properly. There should be a document or information which you use for substantive procedure, and there should be a purpose. So always include the purpose for which you are performing a substantive procedure. Now, a procedure is a proper procedure, document information purpose. And these are the set of substantives which you can always use in for most majority of cases. You have to first of all consider whether I can discuss anything with the management. Is there something which I can discuss with the management? If there is something which you can discuss with the management, you can give it as a first substantive. Discuss with the management about the rationale on the basis of which they have determined the amount of redundancy provision of 110,000 for dashing company. Discuss with the management about the rationale on the basis of which they have determined the amount of redundancy provision of 110,000 for dashing company. Is that a complete answer? No, because you have write a procedure there. Discuss with the management. You have given an information, the rationale on the basis of which the redundancy provision of 110,000 is determined for dashing company. And then you need to give the purpose to confirm whether it is reasonable. So when you write these three set of points together, it's a complete answer. Is it clear, everyone? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Same as that, you can always consider the possibility of obtaining a written representation from the management. So when it comes to written representation, it is nothing but it's a written letter from the management. Instead of discussing something and obtaining oral evidence, it's always good to have a written evidence. So we will obtain written representation from the management about something to ensure something. Here, well, we need to know whether the company is having a present obligation. As we mentioned earlier, we need to know about whether the company have communicated about the redundancy to the company's employees. So what we can do, obtain written representation from the management of dashing company about whether they have informed the redundancy to the company's employees to ensure there's a present obligation. So it's also a complete answer because we have mentioned a procedure, name of the document or information, and purpose. And in all cases, you can always consider obtaining external confirmation, which is a written confirmation from a third party, which is obtained directly by the auditor. So in every case, you have to think who is the external person here. So when it comes to redundancy, well, it's a compensation payment. So well, we know that anyway, an advocate will be having good sort of knowledge about this. So what we can do, we can obtain external confirmation from the lawyers in order to confirm whether there will be a probable future cash outflow for the company in relation to the redundancy. Clear? Obtain external confirmation from the lawyer in order to confirm whether there will be a probable future cash outflow in relation to the redundancy. That is what you need to provide there. Is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next one is correspondence. Correspondence means it's a communication between two persons. We have already learned that along with the substantives. So sometimes by looking at some person's communication or communication between two persons, we will be able to get some data. So here, what we can do, we can review correspondence between the dashing company and the company employees in order to confirm whether the company have informed about the redundancy to the employees to assess whether there is a present obligation. Or we can review the correspondence between the company, dashing company, and the company lawyers in order to confirm whether there will be a probable future cash outflow for the company in relation to the redundancy. So in order to understand any of this, you can use the correspondence. Then wherever there is a calculation, you can always consider the possibility of having recalculating that. So recalculate the redundancy provision of 110,000 of dashing company in order to confirm the mathematical accuracy. Recalculate the redundancy provision of 110,000 for dashing company in order to confirm mathematical accuracy. So if you look at my answer, you can clearly find that I have mentioned the company's name, dashing company. I have mentioned the name of the provision, its redundancy provision. I've included the amount, 110,000. So your answer should also include name of the company, the provision, as well as the amount. Okay. Then you can always have the possibility of performing analytical procedure. You can perform analytical procedure by comparing any data in the current year with that of the previous year. So here you can do one thing. You can compare the amount of provision. However, you have to clearly ask to yourself whether this was a balance that was existing in the previous year as well. So well, we know that when it comes to redundancy provision, that balance will not be there in the previous year because redundancy was not there for the prior year. So in that case, it's better to compare with the industry data. So you can include like that, perform analytical procedure by comparing the redundancy provision of 110,000 for dashing company with the industry data. And in case of significant variance, discuss with the management. Then consider that you have got a breakdown or you have got the financial statements. Okay. Maybe you might be getting a question based on substantive along with the audit risk questions. So in that case, you will be getting a scenario and you will be getting financial statements as well. So the company have provided you revenue, cost of sales, then gross profit, operating expenses, and profit. So in that case, if the company have included the redundancies amount, it will be within the operating expense, right? Because there are no other head to be included there. So in order to confirm whether the expenses in relation to redundancy is included, what we can do, we can obtain the breakdown of operating expense in order to confirm that the expenses in relation to redundancy provision of 110,000 have been included in the statement of P&L. Or consider that if you need to know in some other cases, if you need to know whether the amortization or depreciation charges are included, what you can do, you can obtain the breakdown of operating expense in order to confirm that expenses in relation to depreciation have been included or expenses in relation to amortization have been included in the statement of profit or loss. Then every company will be having board meeting and all the decisions of the company will be taken during board meetings. And every board meeting will have a board minutes. It will include all the discussions of the meeting properly. So if you want to know what decisions were taken during a board meeting, you can review the board minutes to understand that. So here you need to know whether the management have communicated about the redundancy to the employees. So if it is communicated, definitely that decision will be taken during the time of board meeting. So what you can do, you can review the board meeting in order to confirm whether the company have announced about the redundancy to the employees, which creates a present obligation. If you want to agree any of the expenses to supporting documents, you can always do that. you can agree expense to supporting documents, but you should never use the term supporting documents. Instead, that should be specific. Say, for example, agree a sample of sales in the general ledger to the supporting documents such as sales invoice and sales orders in order to confirm the completeness. So in that case, it is appropriate. Sorry, in order to confirm the occurrence. Review the notes to financial statements in order to confirm whether the disclosures in relation to redundancy provision are complete and are in accordance with accounting standards. So you can always consider the possibility of reviewing notes to financial statements in order to confirm adequate amounts of notes have been provided in relation to any of the specific particular accounting treatment area here in relation to redundancy provision. So this is how you need to give answers for substantives. So whenever you get a question, you have to ask to yourself whether there is something which I can inquire or discuss with the management. Is there anything about which I can obtain a written representation? Is there any person outside the company from whom I can obtain an external confirmation? Is there anything, or is there communication between any two parties? Or is there communication between the client and any other party which I can review in order to understand the details in relation to that? Is there any possibility of recalculation or reperformance? Is there any possibility of having analytical procedures? Then, is there any possibility of obtaining a breakdown of expenses, reviewing the board minutes? Is there any possibility of agreeing things to supporting documents and reviewing notes to the financial statements? Is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. അപ്പോൾ ഒന്നുകൂടെ പറഞ്ഞ മക്കളെ എന്തൊക്കെ കാര്യങ്ങൾ നമ്മൾ നോക്കേണ്ടത്? സിനാരിയോ കിട്ടിക്കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ആദ്യം തന്നെ നിങ്ങൾ സിനാരിയോട് ഈ ചോദ്യം ചോദിക്കുക. ഇവിടെ എനിക്ക് എന്താണ് മാനേജ്മെന്റുമായിട്ട് ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നത്, അല്ലെ എൻക്വയറി ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നത്? ഇവിടെ എന്തിനെ പറ്റിയിട്ടാണ് എനിക്ക് റിട്ടേൺ റെപ്രസെന്റേഷൻ കിട്ടുക? ഇവിടെ എക്സ്റ്റേണൽ കൺഫർമേഷൻ ഏതെങ്കിലും തേർഡ് പാർട്ടിയുടെ നിന്ന് വാങ്ങാനുണ്ടോ? കറസ്പോണ്ടൻസ് ആരൊക്കെ തമ്മിലുള്ള നോക്കാം. റീകാൽക്കുലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ റീപെർഫോം ചെയ്യാനുണ്ടോ? അനലിറ്റിക്കൽ പ്രൊസീജിയർ ചെയ്ത് കറണ്ട് ഇയറും പ്രീവിയസ് ഇയറുമായിട്ടോ ഇൻഡസ്ട്രി ഡേറ്റയായിട്ടോ കമ്പയർ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുമോ? ഏതെങ്കിലും എക്സ്പെൻസിന്റെ ബ്രേക്ക് ഡൗൺ എടുക്കാൻ പറ്റുമോ? ബോർഡ് മിനിറ്റ്സ് എനിക്ക് നോക്കാൻ പറ്റുമോ? എക്സ്പെൻസ് സപ്പോർട്ടിംഗ് ഡോക്യുമെന്റ്സുമായിട്ട് മാച്ച് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുമോ? നോട്ട്സ് ഫിനാൻഷ്യൽ സ്റ്റേറ്റ്മെന്റ്സ് നോക്കാൻ പറ്റുമോ? ഈ രീതിയിൽ ആലോചിച്ച് നോക്കുക. ഇസ് ദാറ്റ് ക്ലിയർ? പക്ക? But whenever you write these procedures, always make sure that you are clearly providing a purpose. എല്ലാത്തിനും പർപ്പസ് പറയുന്നുണ്ടെന്നുള്ള കാര്യം എൻഷുർ ചെയ്യണം. എങ്കിൽ മാത്രമേ മാർക്ക് കിട്ടത്തുള്ളൂ. You should always be providing a purpose as well. Is that clear, പക്ക?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So, well, actually, last day we have discussed a question based on PP, but there are some students who have already missed that. So, we'll just do one thing. Those who have already attended this question may not respond now. Others may please quickly go through this question and please try to pick what the examiner actually demands. So, they have asked us a requirement here. Describe the substantive procedure you should perform to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence in relation to the above two matters. So, they have just asked us directly about what substantive procedures that an auditor need to perform in relation to the above two matters. Okay, one in relation to PP and the other one in relation to equity. Please go through this, guys. Done? Okay. In the past, K has received a negative press report over the condition of its fast food restaurants with the comments suggesting that they are old-fashioned and tired-looking. Therefore, during the year, company undertook a full review of all assets and carried out extensive refurbishment to the majority of its restaurants. This review resulted in a significant amount of aging fixtures and fittings being disposed of, and a significant amount of capital expenditure was invested in all remaining restaurants. So what's the actual substantive that the examiner is demanding here?
Disposal addition.
Exactly. They have told us that the K company's restaurants are old. Therefore, the company have undertaken review of all the assets. And after reviewing all the assets, what they have done, they have disposed of some of the assets, and they have also significant amount of capital expenditure investment was made. So there is disposal of assets and addition of assets. So you have to write substantive procedures in relation to the disposal and the addition of assets. Then only you will be getting marks for that. Is that clear, everyone? Okay. There are many students who will not even read the scenario. They will directly write the substantive in relation to PP. You won't get any marks. There are some students who will read the scenario very well, and they will write revaluation of PP's point by looking at the term review. Well, we know that review and revaluation of assets is entirely different. Then there are some students who will write the procedures in relation to disposal only. There are some students who will write the procedures in relation to additions alone, but you will be getting full marks only if you write proper procedures in relation to addition of assets and disposal of assets. If a student have given answer for both of this, then they will be able to get sufficient marks for this question. Then what about the other one? Refurbishment was financed via share issue in April 2015 at a premium of 1.6 million. They have asked for 4 marks, so you have to give 4 points. So you'll be getting 1 mark for each point in relation to substantives. So what are the substantive procedures need to be performed by the auditor in this case? Reserve or no?
Share issue.
No, it's relating to equity share issue, right? Share issue related substantive. And which is the most important point among that? Exactly. We have to review the split between share capital and share premium in order to confirm the nominal value of shares are included within the share capital, and any amount of premium of 1.6 million received is included within the share premium account. Clear? Because they have told us that they have made share issue at a premium of 1.6 million. So the amount of premium should be included within the share premium account, and only nominal value can be included within the share capital. So the most important point for share issue will be that the auditor need to review the split between share capital and share premium in order to confirm that only the nominal value of shares are included within share capital, and any amount of premium of 1.6 million received is included within the share premium account. Is that clear?
Sir.
Yeah.
So for the PPE part,
yeah,
can we include point that says recalculate or reperform?
So if there is any sort of calculations which is done, then you can definitely include the points in relation to recalculation or reperformance. Maybe you can do one thing. You can recalculate the depreciation in relation to the addition of the new assets in order to confirm depreciation of new assets have been appropriately included and are mathematically accurate.
So for the disposal proceeds?
Definitely, you can include the recalculation of disposal proceeds to confirm the mathematical accuracy. Figures illa. Appo figures undavunilla ennundengil figures vechittu ezhudanda. Undenundengil aa data use cheya. If there is any specific data, you can use that. Or else on the basis of the provided data, you can give the substantives.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
ഒരു ഡൗട്ട് ചോദിച്ചോട്ടെ സാർ ഇപ്പൊ ഈ PPയുടെ കേസിൽ ഡിസ്പോസലും അഡീഷനും വന്നാക്കുന്നത് അപ്പോ രണ്ട് സെപ്പറേറ്റ് ഹെഡിങ് ഒറ്റ പോയിന്റ്സ് എല്ലാം ഫിക്സപ്പ് ചെയ്തില്ല
ഹെഡിങ് ആയിട്ട് എഴുതണം നിർബന്ധമില്ല. ഈക്വലി പോയിന്റ്സ് പ്രൊവൈഡ് ചെയ്താലും മതി. നമുക്ക് മാർക്കില്ല, അവരെ പോയിന്റ്സ് മാത്രമായിരിക്കും കൺസിഡർ ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ടാവും കേട്ടോ.
ഓക്കെ, അപ്പൊ രണ്ടും കൂടി മിക്സപ്പ് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഡിസ്പോസലും
മതി 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 മതി. യെസ് പ്ലീസ്.
ഈ അസേർഷൻ ബേസ്ഡ് ആയിട്ട് ചോദിച്ചാലും അപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ മിക്സ്ഡ് അപ്പ് ആയിട്ട് എഴുതിയാൽ മതി.
അസേർഷൻ ബേസ്ഡ് ആയിട്ട് ചോദിച്ചാൽ മിക്സ്ഡ് അപ്പ് ആയിട്ട് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എങ്ങനെയായിരുന്നു?
ഇപ്പം ആക്യുറസി വാല്യുവേഷൻ വേറെ വേറെ ചോദിച്ചു, അപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ ആക്യുറസിന്റെ വാല്യുവേഷന്റെ മിക്സ് ആയിട്ട് എഴുതിയാൽ കുഴപ്പമുണ്ടോ?
ഇല്ല, കുഴപ്പമില്ല. ഓക്കെ. നെക്സ്റ്റ് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ നോക്കാം. ഓക്കെ, so everyone please do one thing. Everyone please read the question in relation to gooseberry. Question number 241, gooseberry. Please read the introductory paragraph and Gooseberry's scenario. And the examiner has asked us, describe the substantive procedure auditor should perform to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence in relation to Gooseberry's research and development expenditure. So they have asked the substantive procedure in relation to Gooseberry's research and development. So please read this question. So let's start with the scenario. It's 1st July 2015. You are the audit manager of Cranberry & Co. and you are currently responsible for the audit of Gooseberry Company, a company which develops and manufactures health and beauty products and distributes this to wholesale customers. Its draft profit before tax is 6.4 million and total asset are 37.2 million for the financial year ending 30th April 2015. The final audit is due to commence shortly and following matters have been brought to your attention. First one is in relation to research and development. Gooseberry Company spent 1.9 million in the current year developing 9 health and beauty products, all of which are at different stages of development. Once they met the criteria under IAS 38 intangible asset for development, Gooseberry Company includes cost incurred within intangible assets. Once the production commences, intangible assets are amortized on a straight line basis over 3 years. Management believes that this amortization policy is a reasonable approximation of assets' useful life, as in this industry there is constant demand for innovative new products. This is what it's explained in the scenario. So we have to give substantive procedures corresponding to each of these cases. So first of all, Gooseberry Company spent 1.9 million in the current year developing 9 health and beauty products, all of which are at different stages of development. So what can we do for this? We have already studied the substantives in relation to research and development, as well as in relation to the intangible asset. So what we can do here? And they were 9 health and beauty products.
Each project details.
What we can do? We studied the point, right? Discuss with the management about the details of each new project along with the stages of development and consider whether it need to be capitalized or expensed. So we have to make it specific to the scenario. What we can do? Discuss with the management of Gooseberry Company about the stages of development of each of 9 new health and beauty products in order to confirm whether it need to be capitalized or treated as a revenue expenditure. That's the first procedure that you can include. Then they have told us that once the intangible asset meets the criteria for capitalization, they will capitalize it. So how can you confirm whether it meets the criteria for capitalization? We have studied the procedures, right? What we can do? For those expenses which they have capitalized as development expenditure, what we can do? We can agree to the invoices and we can confirm the technical feasibility by discussing with the management. And we have studied that we can review market research report in order to understand whether the company has ability to sell the products and whether there is probable future economic benefit will arise from the assets. We have studied the capitalization criteria in relation to IAS 38 intangible assets, right? So we can confirm each of those. Then they have told us once the production commences, intangible assets are amortized over straight line basis for 3 years. What we can do here?
Assumptions check.
Rational. Okay, so what you can do? Discuss with the management about the rationale on the basis of which they have determined the
Useful life of 3 years.
Estimated useful life of 3 years for the amortization calculation and consider whether it is reasonable. Then, is there anything else you can do in relation to that?
Recalculate.
Recalculate the amortization for a sample of intangible asset in order to confirm whether they are in line with straight line basis over 3 years and to confirm the mathematical accuracy. Good. Management believes that this amortization policy is a reasonable approximation of assets' useful life. As this industry, there is constant demand for innovative new products. Okay, so what they have told us is that the amortization policy of the company is appropriate and the amortization estimates are also reasonable. That is what company have mentioned. So what we can do to confirm whether it is in line with the industry average? What we can do here? Perform analytical procedure by comparing the amortization period of each of the intangible asset with that of the industry average. And in case of any variance, discuss with the management about the reasons for the same. Clear? Is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And definitely in addition to that, you can write the points in relation to the disclosure as well. Review the disclosures in relation to research and development in order to confirm whether disclosures are in accordance with IAS 38 intangible assets. Clear? Yeah. Then let's move on to the other question. See, these are the kind of questions which you might be getting directly for the exam. The examiner might ask you to write the substantive procedure to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence in relation to the valuation of trade receivables. So what do you need to do in that case? You need to write specific procedures for valuation of the trade receivables itself. Okay. Or else you might be getting questions like this. They might ask you to write substantive procedures for the valuation of the inventory. So you need to give procedures specifically for the valuation of inventory, research and development. Sometimes question can be more direct. They will ask you to write substantive to confirm the year-end sales tax liability. Then Jasmine Company's question we have already done during the regular session. They will ask us to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence in relation to the trade receivables. But sometimes some assertion might be hidden in the scenarios. You have to check that. They will ask us to write substantive procedure to confirm the bank balance in relation to the going concern. Then same as that, they might ask you to write substantive procedures to confirm the completeness of the trade payables and accruals. Again, it's specific to the assertion. They will ask us to perform substantive procedures, that to audit software procedures in relation to the trade payables and accruals. So what can you do as audit software procedures? We have studied for audit software procedures. It can be used for the purpose of performing cutoff testing, then selecting representative sample for the purpose of
Analytical.
analytical procedures, and what else? For recalculation, right? Okay. Then directors' remuneration they have asked there. Then again, see, they have asked us for substantive procedures in relation to completeness of the company's income. So it's trade receivables and revenue. So you can use the trade receivables and revenue related point to confirm the completeness. They have asked us for trade payables. They have asked us the substantive procedures we need to perform to obtain in relation to the trade receivables as well. Alaunda, see, they have asked us for revaluation of the PP. We have studied the points specifically for revaluation of PP. Valuation of inventory is asked. That's why I've already told you that valuation of inventory is important. Then in relation to the bank balance and relation to going concern. Okay. See, they have asked us substantive procedure which we need to perform to obtain before and during the inventory count related procedures. So sufficient appropriate audit evidence can be obtained during, before, after the inventory count. And from the set of inventory related points, here they have asked for 5 marks about before the count and during the count. So you need to make a mix of before and during the count procedures. So see, they have asked us to write the substantive procedures in relation to rights issue. Well, we know that let it be a rights issue or a regular issue. Anyway, when it comes to an issue of shares, the procedures will be same. And when it comes to the rights issue, the only difference is that the shares will be sold at an amount which is less than the market value of the share. That's the only difference. Other than that, every procedure will remain the same. But when it comes to bonus issue, things won't be same, because when it comes to bonus issue, we won't be getting any payment from the shareholders, because bonus issue will be the shares which is provided free of cost to the existing shareholders. So bonus issues case will be different, but the rights issues case will remain the same. They have asked us the procedures in relation to research and development also. Then Hawthorne, they have asked us to perform procedures in relation to the reconciliation. Then they have asked for procedures in relation to receivables existence and valuation. So when we get a mix of scenario like existence and valuation, you can mix the substantives together. Okay. Pineapple and Co. Here they have specifically asked us analytical procedures. So when they ask us for analytical procedure, we only need to mention about the comparison between the current year and the prior year balances. So when they ask for revenue, compare the current year revenue with that of the previous year and investigate in case of significant difference. Compare the current year revenue on the basis of major product line and discuss with the industry average to consider whether there is significant variance. So you can write related points. So if they are specifically asking you for depreciation related points, then you have to focus on depreciation related points itself rather than focusing on general PPE. Then sometimes you might be getting a question on food poisoning claim. What are the procedures need to be obtained by the auditor in relation to food poisoning claim? So you have to read the scenario properly. If the food poisoning claim have created an issue, there will be probable future cash outflow for the company for which a provision have to be created. So the examiner might be asking us to perform audit procedures in relation to provision for litigation and claim. So you have to literally read the scenario to understand what the examiner is actually intending. So these are the sort of questions that we have already got in our exam. So please do consider going through all the substantives very well. And after that, please attend maximum number of questions from the area of substantives because it is very important. You can definitely expect a question from the area of substantive procedures. So you have to have a good knowledge and you have to spend sufficient time on substantive procedures related area. Is that clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we'll do 2 more questions from the area of substantives now.
Sir, a 5 minutes break here.
Yeah. Okay. So let's continue with the session and let's start with a question. So it's question called ENCORE. And the examiner has asked us to describe the substantive procedure auditor should perform to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence in relation to ENCORE companies, vehicles addition and disposal. So they have asked us for procedures in relation to addition and disposal of the vehicle, but they have got us a scenario as well. So please read the scenario and try to pick the substantive that we need to perform in order to confirm the addition and disposal of vehicle is appropriate. So please start with this question, everyone. So let's start with the question. It is 1st July 2015. You are the audit supervisor with Velo & Co. and you are working on the final audit of ENCORE company for the year ending 30th April 2015. ENCORE company is a waste management company supplying its services to a variety of governmental and business organizations. ENCORE company's draft profit before tax is 5.3 million and total assets are 40.1 million. You have been provided with the following information regarding the draft financial statements. Vehicle additions and disposal. On 1st February 2015, ENCORE company replaced 20 of its recycling vehicle. The old vehicle had a carrying amount of 1.8 million as recorded in the non-current asset register were given in part exchange against new vehicle costing 4.6 million. Cash consideration of 3.9 million was also paid. So they have told us that they have purchased new vehicle for 4.6 million, out of which they have paid a cash consideration of 3.9 million. So what is the amount of exchange value we got for the old assets that are being sold to the company? It's 4.6 minus 3.9. So it's 0.7 million. And we have disposed of asset worth 1.8 million and for which we got only 0.7 million. So minus 1.8, which means we have sold asset at a loss of 1.1 million. Yeah. So this is the information which we got from the scenario. So the company have purchased 20 assets. They have disposed of 20 assets. They have disposed of the asset at a loss. They have paid a cash consideration of 3.9 million. So you have to write substantive procedures in relation to each of these. So the first thing, I will give you one by one, and you have to tell me the substantives that you can perform in relation to each of these cases. First thing, ENCORE company have replaced 20 assets. They have disposed of 20 assets and they have added 20 assets. How can you confirm this?
Physically verify.
Good. You can physically verify sample of additions during the year in order to confirm whether the company have actually added assets in order to confirm the existence of the assets. Okay. Then as a sentence, or else you can frame it like this: physically inspect a sample of new vehicle, confirming the registration number and agreeing it to the non-current asset register to assess the existence. Okay, then what else you can do in relation to the same? So when a company added new asset, where we need to show it in the company's books? Yeah, in the non-current asset register. So you can do one thing, you can review the non-current asset register of the company in order to confirm whether the addition of 20 assets have been included and the disposal of 20 assets have been removed from the non-current asset register. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. The next one, they have told us that they have assets worth 1.8 million, which they have sold for 0.7 million. So the assets were disposed at a loss. So what you can do in this case?
Recalculate the loss on disposal.
Okay, you can recalculate the loss of disposal of 1.1 million. For what purpose? And agree to trial balance and statement of P&L to confirm the mathematical accuracy. Clear? Okay, so recalculate the loss of disposal of 1.1 million and agree it to the trial balance and statement of profit or loss and confirm whether it is mathematically accurate. Then next one, they have told us that company have paid a cash consideration of 3.9 million for the assets. So how can you confirm that whether the cash consideration is actually paid or not?
Cash payment to cash book and bank statement.
Yeah, you can agree the cash payment of 3.9 million for the new assets to the cash book and bank statements. Good. Then these are the specific points you can directly link. What else? When a company adds new asset, what we need to do additionally? We have to charge the depreciation, right? So what you can do? You can recalculate the depreciation expenses of the new assets in order to confirm whether the depreciation have been charged on the asset from the date on which the asset becomes available for use, right? Okay. Then what else you can do in this case? Exactly. You can review the notes to financial statements in order to confirm disclosures for the addition of assets and disposal of assets have been provided in accordance with IAS 16, property, plant and equipment. So these are the set of substantive procedures which we can do in relation to the specific scenario. Is that clear, everyone? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is how you will be performing the substantive procedures. So as we discussed earlier, you must always be considering one thing. Whenever you write the substantive procedure in relation to any of the questions in the scenario, you should always consider whether it's a substantive based on general or it's an assertion specific substantive. Is that a scenario based substantive or is that a substantive based on scenario plus assertions, which means the assertion might not be mentioned directly in the requirement. Instead, the assertion might be provided within the scenario. So either way, the substantives related questions can appear for your exam. So whenever you write a substantive related question, you should always make sure that you must be including the name of the client if possible, figures if possible, and any other relevant details in the scenario should also be considered while providing substantives. You should not never write substantives which are by-headed. Instead, you can use the by-headed substantives, but that should be applied directly to the scenario. And whenever you write a substantive, you should always make sure that there's a proper procedure. The document or the information have to be provided, and the purpose for which you are performing this procedure should also be clearly defined. And in addition to which, when you write the substantive procedures, you must always be considering whether there is any possibility of discussing or inquiring something with the management. Is there anything about which you can obtain written representation? Is there any possibility of getting an external confirmation from someone? Or is there any possibility of reviewing a correspondence? Recalculation of reperformance is possible. You have to consider whether there is any possibility of performing an analytical procedure. You have to consider taking the breakdown of expenses. You can review the board minutes. You can agree the expenses to the supporting documents and review the notes of financial statements. Is that clear, everyone?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So this is what you need to consider in relation to the substantive procedures. So these substantive procedures are one of the most important and core area, as I have mentioned it multiple times. And definitely you can expect a question from the area of substantive procedures. So everyone, please do revise the area of substantive procedures properly. and please try to practice maximum questions from the area of substantive procedures. And whenever you get the points of substantive procedures, you should make sure that you're writing it directly on the basis of the scenario. You should not give any by head points. And for general points, you won't be getting much marks. So every substantive should be based on scenario. And always try to include the client's name and figure as well as the data. I have mentioned it multiple times now. It is because it's that important. Okay. All right. So in the next day's session, we will be focusing on the area of internal controls, then corporate governance and ethics. So please do revise those areas as well, because we'll be easily be able to discuss about the things that we need to consider specifically for the exam in the tomorrow session. So if you have got any specific doubts on the basis of that, you can also ask me with regarding that. And in addition to the areas as we discuss now, we will also be practicing MCQ questions also. Okay. All right. So please do revise both the areas in relation to the corporate governance, ethics, and internal controls for tomorrow's session. And do revise the area that we discussed in the today's session relating to substantives as well. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye.